Jai Gurudev. Today we are honored to have with us two esteemed guests, an art of living expert and an officer of Vedic Dharma Sansthan. We will discuss how servant leadership is at the core of the art of living philosophy and how this has been exemplified through various practices like Sudarshan Kriya, meditation, sadhana, mantra chanting, and other forms of spiritual discipline. Additionally, we will reflect on how the success of art of living initiatives under the guidance of His Holiness Gurudev Shri Shri Ravi Shankarji parallels the timeless examples of servant leadership we have seen throughout history. Jai Gurudev, can you explain how servant leadership forms the core of the art of living philosophy? Jai Gurudev, yes, servant leadership is deeply rooted in the art of living's ethos as taught by Gurudev Shri Shri Ravi Shankarji. It's about leading by example and focusing on service to others, which Gurudev has embodied throughout his life. Every initiative, whether it's the large scale humanitarian projects, yoga programs, or stress relief practices like Sudarshan Kriya, is undertaken with the vision of serving humanity. In fact, all art of living programs are designed to elevate individuals so they can better serve society. The core idea behind this is not only helping individuals manage stress, anxiety, and challenges, but also encouraging them to develop a sense of responsibility toward a larger community. Service is not just an action, it's a mindset. When participants engage in seva or selfless service, meditation, and spiritual practices like Sudarshan Kriya, they experience a sense of deep connection to others, thus nurturing servant leadership from within. That's beautiful. How do you think servant leadership is reflected in the various art of living practices like Sudarshan Kriya, meditation, sadhana, and mantra chanting? These practices are powerful tools for self transformation and they naturally promote servant leadership. For example, Sudarshan Kriya and other forms of pranayama cleanse the mind and body, making an individual more centered and resilient. When someone is peaceful and calm, they become more attuned to the needs of others, which is the essence of servant leadership. Meditation and sadhana bring clarity of thought and depth of awareness, which are key components of leading selflessly. When leaders practice these regularly, they become more empathetic, compassionate, and less driven by ego, which is essential in servant leadership. Mantra chanting and practices like Gayatri Japa or Sandhya Vandanam create positive vibrations that promote harmony within oneself and the environment. This fosters a mindset of humility and service, guiding individuals to lead with the intention of uplifting others rather than seeking power for themselves. To add to that, Vedic practices like Trikal Sandhya, Agni Karyam, and Seva also align with the concept of servant leadership. These rituals are deeply connected to a sense of duty or dharma and selfless action or karma yoga, which are the foundations of servant leadership. When we do these practices, we align ourselves with a higher purpose and are reminded that leadership is about serving the divine and humanity. Servant leadership is often associated with figures like Mahatma Gandhi and Nelson Mandela. How do their examples and others like them resonate with the work done under the Art of Living banner? If we examine the lives of these great leaders, Mahatma Gandhi, Nelson Mandela, Martin Luther King Jr., and others like Mother Teresa, Desmond Tutu, and Cesar Chavez, we see one common thread. They were all servant leaders who prioritized the well being of the people they served. Gandhiji's commitment to non-violence and Mandela's vision for reconciliation mirror Gurudev's teachings of peace and compassion. Similarly, Cheryl Batchelder, former CEO of Popeyes, and Fred Rogers, the beloved children's television host, led by nurturing the potential in others and empowering them to succeed. This is precisely what the Art of Living does through its practices, empowering individuals to become better versions of themselves so they can contribute meaningfully to society. Gurudev himself often speaks about how leadership is about empowering others to lead. This is the hallmark of servant leadership as exemplified by the figures mentioned, and it's very much the spirit behind the Art of Living's work. How did the above mentioned servant leaders set an example for those practicing Sudarshan Kriya, meditation, and yoga in the Art of Living context? Each of these leaders, whether it's Angela Merkel or Larry Page or Howard Schultz or Bill Gates, has shown that leadership is not about the self, but about creating environments where others can flourish. This is the exact outcome that Art of Living practices encourage. By doing Sudarshan Kriya or Sadhana, you connect with your inner self and learn to dissolve the ego. This allows you to step into leadership roles where your main focus is to serve others. For instance, Mohammad Yunus, the pioneer of microfinance, or Paul Polman, the former CEO of Unilever, didn't just lead organizations, they served humanity by solving critical global problems. Through practices like Gayatri Japa, Shakti Kriya, and Sayam Sadhana, individuals in Art of Living are equipped to cultivate the same leadership qualities: selflessness, foresight, and deep empathy. What role does seva or selfless service play in reinforcing the principles of servant leadership within Art of Living? Seva is the cornerstone of servant leadership within the Art of Living. Gurudev teaches that the highest form of service is to uplift others and their state of mind. And through seva, individuals transcend their personal desires and become instruments of positive change, whether it's through humanitarian efforts like disaster relief, education programs, or teaching Sudarshan Kriya to help others manage stress. Art of Living participants are constantly encouraged to serve. This reflects the principles of Fred Rogers, Jacinda Ardern, and even ancient figures like Harriet Tubman or Vinoba Bhave, who all demonstrated that the greatest leaders are those who serve without expecting anything in return. As Gurudev says, service is the expression of love, and through practices like seva, meditation, and yoga, people are taught to lead from the heart and create impact. How does servant leadership make Art of Living's efforts sustainable, both at an individual and organizational level? Sustainability comes from the fact that servant leadership is not about short term gains, it's about fostering long term well being, both for individuals and society. When participants practice Sudarshan Kriya, meditation, and engage in seva, they are continuously renewing their mental, physical, and emotional energy, which sustains their ability to serve. This creates ripple effects across communities. Leaders like Paul Farmer, Alan Johnson, Anne Sirleaf, and Richard Branson understood that when you serve others, you are invested in long term growth and stability. This is the same ethos that drives the Art of Living. The organization's growth and global reach have been sustained over decades because the leadership from Gurudev down to each volunteer and teacher and sevak is rooted in service, compassion, and collective well-being. Thank you both for such an insightful discussion. This interview has really illuminated how servant leadership is deeply interwoven with the Art of Living philosophy and practices, and how leaders around the world, both historical and contemporary, have demonstrated its profound impact. Thank you. It was a pleasure sharing how the timeless values of servant leadership continue to manifest in modern spiritual and organizational contexts. Yes, and we hope that more people can embody these principles in their lives, not just through leadership positions, but in every act of service and compassion. Thank you for those enlightening insights. Moving forward, let's continue by discussing how other leaders, both modern and historical, embody servant leadership and align with the core philosophy of Art of Living. We have mentioned many inspiring names, but there are a few more to cover. Can you elaborate on additional examples of servant leaders and how their approaches resonate with Art of Living practices such as Sudarshan Kriya, mantra chanting, and seva? Absolutely. A name that stands out in servant leadership is Herb Kelleher, co founder of Southwest Airlines. He was known for putting his employees first, a leadership style that resonates deeply with the Art of Living. Kelleher believed that by taking care of his employees, they would in turn take care of their customers. This serve first mindset is very much in line with Gurudev Shri Ravi Shankar Ji's teachings, where we prioritize serving others, whether it's through seva, service, or teaching others transformative tools like Sudarshan Kriya. We see similar traits in John Wooden, the legendary basketball coach. Wooden's leadership wasn't just about winning games, but about developing his players as people, emphasizing personal growth and humility. This reflects the Art of Living's approach, where leadership is about nurturing individuals to be the best versions of themselves, grounded in self awareness and compassion. That's quite a compelling compassion and comparison. What about leaders from non business backgrounds, such as those involved in activism, humanitarian work, or education? Yes, servant leadership transcends industries. Take Jan Adams, a pioneer in social work and co founder of Hull House, which provided community services to the poor in Chicago. She led by example, dedicating her life to the welfare of others, which is a living example of Karma Yoga, the path of selfless service. Art of Living programs are structured to cultivate this very spirit of service within individuals, whether it's through seva projects, meditation, or daily practices like Trikal Sandhya and Gayatri Japa. Another great servant leader is Booker T. Washington, an educator and advocate for African American advancement. His work was about empowering people through education and self discipline and reliance, mirroring the Art of Living's goal of empowering individuals to take control of their own well being and lead with resilience, calmness, and compassion. Practices like Shakti Kriya and Sanyam Sadhana build that inner strength and focus, which in turn enables participants to become more effective leaders. We also can't forget Malala Yousafzai, who, despite facing immense challenges, has become a global advocate for girls' education. Her leadership is rooted in the principle of nonviolence and the empowerment of others. In Art of Living, this is aligned with the value of ahimsa or nonviolence, and how through meditation and pranayama, individuals find the inner peace needed to inspire and uplift those around them. It's fascinating how servant leadership can be seen across various walks of life, not just within traditional leadership roles. Can you expand on how practices like pranayama and meditation help cultivate qualities similar to those displayed by servant leaders? Yes, when we talk about pranayama, Sudarshan Kriya, and meditation, we are discussing techniques that help us shed layers of stress and ego, making room for deeper qualities like empathy, patience, and clarity. These are essential traits for any servant leaders. Leaders like Howard Schultz of Starbucks or Satya Nadella of Microsoft have repeatedly emphasized the importance of empathy in leadership. Their leadership isn't driven by power but by a genuine desire to serve their employees, customers, and communities. The daily discipline of pranayama and meditation allows individuals to become more centered. This inner stability is what we see in people like Wangari Maathai, the founder of the Green Belt movement, whose leadership focused on empowering women and protecting the environment. Similarly, Glenn Blanchard, who co authored The Servant Leader, has always spoken about the importance of fostering servant leadership within organizations where humility and service drive success. The inner calm that comes from spiritual practices enables these leaders to stay connected to their values while navigating complex challenges. Another beautiful example is George Washington Carver, the scientist and inventor who was dedicated to improving the lives of poor farmers through innovative agricultural techniques. His leadership was about uplifting others by sharing knowledge, much like the spirit behind Art of Living's teachings and teachers and volunteers. Every Art of Living teacher and volunteer is trained to share these powerful techniques selflessly to spread peace, health, and happiness in their communities. You have both provided fantastic examples. How does the concept of servant leadership fit into the larger global vision that His Holiness Gurudev Shri Shri Ravi Shankar Ji has for the art of living in the world? Yes, Gurudev's vision is one of a world, one world family or Vasadaiva Kutumbakam, where leadership is about service, compassion, and responsibility. His approach to leadership can be compared to figures like Eleanor Roosevelt, who was known for her advocacy for human rights and her servant leadership style. Similarly, Gurudev has inspired millions to take up leadership roles that are rooted in love and service. Every Art of Living initiated from trauma relief programs in war zones to youth leadership training programs is about empowering people to become servant leaders. In fact, Oprah Winfrey, a name synonymous with servant leadership, has always spoken about how spirituality and service go hand in hand. Gurudev believes that when we lead with a servant's heart, the barriers between people dissolve and true peace can be achieved. Adding to that, the work done through Art of Living isn't just about individual transformation but societal transformation. We have seen servant leadership in the life of Abraham Lincoln, who worked tirelessly for unity and equality, and in Jimmy Carter, whose post presidential humanitarian work has touched countless lives. Art of Living Seva initiatives, whether it's building schools, providing clean water, or teaching stress relief techniques, are grounded in the same principles of uplifting society through selfless leadership. That's truly inspiring. What role do you see for Art of Living participants in taking up the mantle of servant leadership in their own lives and communities? Every individual has the potential to be a servant leader, and Art of Living such practices help people unlock that potential, whether you are a CEO, a teacher, or a volunteer. The practices of yoga, Sudarshan Kriya, and meditation help you become more mindful, compassionate, and aware of others' needs. Just like Doug Conant, the former CEO of Campbell Soup Company, who turned the company around by focusing on employee engagement and well being, anyone can create lasting change by prioritizing service. The beauty of Art of Living is that it makes servant leadership accessible to everyone, not just those in formal leadership positions. Through Seva and the daily practice of yoga and meditation, participants can lead by example in their homes, workplaces, and communities. As Gurudev says, when you find inner peace, you naturally spread peace. This is the essence of servant leadership. Absolutely. And when we look at leaders like John Quincy Adams, who believed that true leadership inspired others to dream and achieve, we see that the greatest leaders aren't those who wield power, but those who empower others. Every Art of Living participant has the opportunity to uplift others, just as Rosa Parks did when she sparked the civil rights movement with her courage and humility. Thank you both for this deep exploration of how servant leadership forms the foundation of the Art of Living philosophy. It's clear that true spiritual practice is seva and the example of great leaders. The Art of Living community is helping to foster a world where leadership is about serving humanity. Thank you. It was an honor to discuss these principles which are so dear to us all, Jai Gurudev. Indeed, servant leadership is the path to lasting peace and transformation, both at the individual and collective levels. Thank you for this wonderful conversation, Jai Gurudev. Jai Gurudev, and thank you for such insightful answers as we continue to explore the themes of servant leadership and how aligns with the art of living. We can you elaborate on how other leaders not yet mentioned above embodied this principle of servant leadership and how their actions connect with the teachings of His Holiness Gurudev Shri Shri Ravi Shankar Ji. One notable example we haven't touched upon is Nelson Mandela, whose entire life was a testament to servant leadership. He led South Africa through a peaceful transition from apartheid to democracy, always putting the nation's welfare ahead of his personal interests. His leadership was rooted in forgiveness, compassion, and the greater good of the people, values we cultivate in art of living practices like meditation and Sudarshan Kriya. Mandela's inner strength mirrors what Gurudev teaches. When we find inner peace, we can lead with wisdom and equanimity. Yes, and Mandela is an extraordinary example. Similarly, Martin Luther King Jr. exemplified servant leadership in his fight for civil rights in America. His leadership was non-violent and deeply spiritual, much like the principles of ahimsa non-violence that Art of Living emphasizes. His work was about service to humanity, justice, and uplifting the marginalized. Practices like pranayama and yoga help Art of Living participants develop the patience and resilience needed to be servant leaders, much like King did. Another figure worth mentioning is Mother Teresa, whose entire life was a living example of selfless service. She dedicated her life to helping the poor, the sick, and the dying. This form of selfless action or karma yoga is at the heart of Art of Living's philosophy, whether it's through seva projects or the day-to-day application of mindfulness and meditation. Mother Teresa's example teaches us that true leadership is about lifting others up through compassion and humility. Exactly. Let's not forget Mahatma Gandhi, who is perhaps the most iconic example of servant leadership. Gandhiji's principle of satyagraha, truth and nonviolence, guided his leadership of India's independence movement. He showed the world that it's possible to lead through service, humility, and love. In Art of Living, through practices like Sanyam Sadhana, meditation, and Seva, participants are encouraged to live these very values in their leadership, whether at home, at work, or in the community. That's very powerful. Can we talk more about the connection between these values and leaders in the corporate world? There are a few corporate leaders from our list that embody servant leadership as well. How do the approaches align with the teachings of Art of Living? Absolutely. Let's take Tony Sai, the late CEO of Zappos. He was a true servant leader in the business world, focused on creating a culture of happiness and employee well being. His leadership was centered around empowering his employees and prioritizing their happiness, much like Art of Living encourages leaders to care for their teams and communities. Through practices like Sudarshan Kriya and Yoga, we develop the emotional intelligence and empathy that is essential for this kind of leadership. Another corporate leader who embodies these principles is Indra Nooyi, the former CEO of PepsiCo. She was known for her people first leadership approach, always ensuring that her team felt supported and valued. Nui often spoke about how her leadership was driven by a sense of responsibility to the greater good, which resonates with the Art of Living's emphasis on collective well being through practices like seva and meditation. Similarly, Howard Schultz, the former CEO of Starbucks, built a culture of servant leadership by focusing on the well being of his employees. His leadership emphasized creating a company culture where everyone felt cared for, which is deeply aligned with the values taught by Gurudev. In Art of Living, we believe that when you care for the people around you, you create an environment where everyone can thrive, whether it's in a company, a community, or a family. It's amazing to see how these corporate leaders, through servant leadership, have transformed their companies and industries in ways that reflect Art of Living's values. Let's dive into leaders in education and activism, such as Malala Yousafzai and Booker T. Washington, who were also a great servant leaders. How do their contributions align with servant leadership and the practices promoted by Art of Living? Malala Yousafzai is a perfect example of how servant leadership manifests in activism. Despite facing immense personal danger, she chose to speak up for girls' education and continues to be a voice for the voiceless. Her leadership is rooted in empathy, courage, and service to others, which aligns beautifully with the Art of Living's teachings and practices like meditation and Sudarshan Kriya help individuals build resilience, which is essential for this kind of leadership. Booker T. Washington, another important figure, was an educator who believed that empowering people through education was a path to societal improvement. He was a servant leader who focused on uplifting marginalized communities through knowledge and self reliance. This aligns with the Art of Living's mission to empower individuals through personal growth and self development practices like yoga, pranayama, and seva. Yes, and let's also talk about Helen Keller, who is another example of servant leadership in education and activism. Despite being blind and deaf, she devoted her life to advocating for people with disabilities. Her leadership was centered around breaking down barriers and ensuring that everyone, regardless of their limitations, had access to education and opportunities. This is very much in line with the Art of Living's philosophy of inclusiveness and service. By practicing meditation and seva, we can break down the barriers within ourselves and serve others more effectively. Those are very remarkable examples. As we wrap up, are there any final leaders you would like to mention who embody servant leadership and who haven't been discussed yet? And how do they connect with the Art of Living's philosophy? One leader we haven't yet mentioned is Fred Rogers, better known as Mr. Rogers. His approach to leadership was all about kindness, empathy, and making sure that every child felt valued and loved. His gentle, servant hearted approach is something we cultivate through practices like Gayatri Japa, where chanting the Gayatri Mantra creates an atmosphere of love and compassion that touches everyone around us. Another name worth mentioning is Jacinda Ardern, the former Prime Minister of New Zealand. She led with compassion, humility, and a genuine concern for the well being of our people, particularly during times of crisis. Her approach mirrors the kind of servant leadership that Gurudev teaches. Leaders in Art of Living are encouraged to remain calm, centered, and compassionate. Regardless of external circumstances, this is something we see in Ardern's leadership as well. Lastly, Desmond Tutu, who worked tirelessly for reconciliation in South Africa, is another perfect example. His leadership was about bringing people together, healing divisions, and serving the greater good. This is the essence of what we teach in the Art of Living, where we encourage people to become leaders who heal, uplift, and serve through selflessness and compassion. This has been an incredible exploration of servant leadership and how it is woven into the fabric of Art of Living's practices and philosophy. Thank you both for sharing these powerful examples and insights, Jai Gurudev, and thank you. It was a pleasure to discuss how servant leadership is truly the core of everything we do at the Art of Living. Thank you. It's been an honor to reflect on how these great leaders, past and present, embody the same values and virtues that we cultivate through the Art of Living. Jai Gurudev. Jai Gurudev, and thank you for that insightful discussion on servant leadership. As we continue, I would love to hear your thoughts on how their leadership styles reflect the values that Art of Living embodies. Let's begin with Abraham Lincoln. Yes, Abraham Lincoln is an exceptional example of servant leadership. His humility, moral integrity, and unwavering dedication to the greater good during one of America's most challenging periods, the Civil War, are truly inspiring. Lincoln's deep sense of duty and his focus on uniting the nation over personal ambition is a powerful reflection of what His Holiness Gurudev Shri Shri Ravi Shankarji teaches. In Art of Living, we emphasize Sudarshan Kriya, meditation, and Seva as ways to cultivate the qualities that Lincoln exemplified: patience, compassion, and the ability to see beyond one's own ego for the good of the whole. Absolutely. Lincoln's leadership was grounded in service to humanity, especially during a time of conflict and division. He was able to remain calm and centered even when the country was divided. In Art of Living, we teach practices like Trikal Sandhya, where regular meditation and reflection help people maintain inner peace and clarity no matter the external circumstances and challenges. Lincoln's leadership reminds us that by staying connected to our higher purpose, we can lead with wisdom and integrity. That's a very insightful connection. Another figure we haven't yet covered is Cesar Chavez, a labor leader and civil rights activist. How does his work tie into servant leadership, and how can his example inspire Art of Living participants? Cesar Chavez is a wonderful example of servant leadership in the context of social justice. He led the United Farm Workers movement advocating for the rights of farm laborers in the United States. Chavez was deeply committed to the welfare of others and used nonviolent tactics to bring about change, much like Mahatma Gandhi did. His leadership was based on service to others, especially those who were most marginalized. In Art of Living, the practice of seva or selfless service is one of our core principles. Chavez's life work embodies this value, showing that real leadership comes from lifting others up. Yes, and his dedication to the cause without seeking personal gain aligns perfectly with the teachings of Gurudev. Chavez's mantra of "Si pe puede" or "Yes, we can" reflects the kind of resilience and collective spirit that we cultivate through art of living practices like Shakti Kriya and Pranayama. When we tap into our inner strength, we find that we can overcome any obstacle in the service of a higher cause. Chavez's life is a reminder that servant leadership requires both compassion and innocent qualities that can be nurtured through meditation and yoga. That's a great point. Another individual I'm curious about is Pope Francis, who has been praised for his humble and inclusive approach to leadership. How does his example align with Art of Living's philosophy? Yes, Pope Francis is a contemporary servant leader who exemplifies humility, simplicity, and inclusiveness. From the moment he took on the role of Pope, he has focused on serving the marginalized, advocating for the poor, and promoting peace and interfaith dialogue. His leadership is truly about service to humanity. And this aligns beautifully with the teachings of Gurudev. In Art of Living, we place a strong emphasis on sadhana, spiritual practices, and seva or selfless service. Through these practices, we cultivate the same qualities that Pope Francis demonstrates: humility, compassion, and a sense of responsibility for the well being of others. Pope Francis's emphasis on humility and service also connects with the Vedic tradition, where a leader is seen as a servant of the people, not as someone to be worshipped or feared. His leadership is grounded in the belief that every individual, regardless of their background, deserves dignity and respect. And Art of Living reinforces the same belief through practices like Gayatri Japa, which helps us tune into the universal consciousness and cultivate love and respect for all beings. That's very insightful. Let's move on to another key figure, Harriet Tubman, who played such a vital role in the abolition of slavery. How does her life reflect servant leadership? Harriet Tubman is an extraordinary example of servant leadership through courageous and selfless action. She risked her own life repeatedly to lead others to freedom through the Underground Railroad. Her leadership was based on bravery, resilience, and an unwavering commitment to justice. This aligns with what we teach in Art of Living about the importance of acting in service to others, even in the face of great personal risk. Through practices like Sanyam Sadhana, we cultivate inner courage and the ability to face challenges with a calm mind, just as Harriet Tubman did. Harriet Tubman's story is also a testament to how deep faith and spiritual strength can fuel servant leadership. She was guided by a strong belief in a higher purpose, much like the teachings of the Bhagavad Gita, where Lord Krishna advises Arjuna to act in service of dharma or righteousness without attachment to the outcome. In Art of Living, we emphasize this principle through practices like Agni Karyam and Upanayanam, which helps individuals align their actions with a higher purpose. and serve with selflessness just as Tubman did. Thank you for that. Let's also talk about Rosa Parks, another figure who stood up for justice through quiet but powerful acts of resistance. How does her story reflect the values of servant leadership? Rosa Parks is an excellent example of servant leadership through quiet strength and dignity. Her refusal to give up her seat on a segregated bus was a pivotal moment in the civil rights movement, not because of loud protest, but because of her calm and resolute defiance. In Art of Living, we teach that true strength comes from within through practices like Shakti Kriya and Pranayama, which help individuals develop the calm inner strength needed to face adversity. Parks's leadership was about standing up for what is right in a way that inspires others, which is a core value of servant leadership. Indeed, and her leadership shows that even the smallest actions, when done with courage and purpose, can bring about significant change. In the Vedic tradition, we have the concept of dharma or righteous duty, which is reflected in Parks' choice to stand up for justice even at great personal risk. Through art of living practices like Sandhya Vandanam and sadhana, we encourage individuals to stay grounded in their principles and act in service to the greater good, much like Rosa Parks did. That's very powerful. As we near the end of our interview, let's also mention John Wooden, the legendary basketball coach known for his focus on character and servant leadership. How does his leadership philosophy connect with art of living principles? John Wooden is a wonderful example of servant leadership in the world of sports. He emphasized the importance of character, teamwork, and humility in his coaching, always putting the well being and personal growth of his players as first. His leadership style was about building people, not just winning games. This aligns closely with the art of living's focus on personal development through yoga, pranayama, and sadhana. Wooden's leadership reminds us that true success is about helping others become the best version of themselves, which is exactly what we aim to do in Art of Living programs. Wooden's leadership was also grounded in discipline and self mastery, which are essential aspects of the Vedic tradition. Through practices like Trikal, Sandhya, and mantra chanting, we cultivate the focus, discipline, and humility that Wooden instilled in his players. His leadership style is a beautiful reflection of the servant leadership model that we teach in Art of Living. This has been such a comprehensive exploration of how servant leadership is central to Art of Living's philosophy, with rich examples from across history and fields of work. Thank you both for sharing your insights on how the practices of Art of Living under the guidance of Gurudev Shri Shri Ravi Shankarji nurture this form of leadership in all of us. Thank you for this opportunity to share how these timeless values of servant leadership are woven into the fabric of our teachings, Jai Gurudev. It's been a pleasure to reflect on how these great leaders, like those mentioned today, embody the great principles, the very principles we aim to cultivate in the art of living. Thank you, and Jai Gurudev. Thank you for those enlightening connections between the principles of servant leadership and the examples of leaders who we have already discussed. As we move forward, let's begin with Nelson Mandela, whose leadership in South Africa is widely celebrated. How do his values reflect the core teachings of Art of Living? Yes, Nelson Mandela is a remarkable example of servant leadership, particularly in the face of adversity. Despite being imprisoned for 27 years, he emerged with a message of forgiveness, reconciliation, and unity. His leadership was about serving his country by promoting peace and equality rather than seeking personal power. In the art of living, we practice Sudarshan Kriya and meditation to help release negativity and stress, allowing us to approach life with calmness and compassion, qualities that Mandela embodied throughout his life. His approach aligns with our teachings on forgiveness and non-violence. Absolutely, Mandela's capacity for forgiveness is central to his servant leadership. In Vedic philosophy, there is a strong emphasis on the power of Sanyam, or self restraint, and sadhana, or spiritual practice, to cultivate inner peace. Mandela's personal journey was deeply spiritual. Even though it wasn't always framed in religious terms, his ability to inspire millions through humility and service is a reflection of the spiritual strength we aim to develop through practices like Shakti Kriya and Seva in the art of living. That's a wonderful connection. Let's also explore Mother Teresa, who is often considered a global icon of selfless service. How does her life resonate with the art of living philosophy of servant leadership? Mother Teresa is the epitome of servant leadership. Her life was dedicated entirely to serving the poorest of the poor, showing immense compassion and humility. She embodied the spirit of seva or selfless service, which is a cornerstone of the Art of Living's philosophy. Through her work, she demonstrated that servant leadership is not about grand gestures, but about small daily acts of kindness. In Art of Living, we teach that through practices like Gayatri Japa and Pranayama, we can cultivate a heart's capacity to serve others selflessly, just as Mother Teresa did. Mother Teresa's life also resonates with the Vedic ideal of Karma Yoga, the path of selfless action. Her work was an act of devotion, and her humility in serving others reflected the same principles that we encourage through Vedic practices like Upanayanam and Sandhya Vandanam. Her life shows us that the true leader serves without expectation of reward, which is a core teaching of the Bhagavad Gita. In Art of Living, we nurture this spirit through our programs that combine sadhana and seva as tools for inner and outer transformation. That's beautifully articulated. Now let's turn to Martin Luther King Jr., another figure who practiced nonviolence and servant leadership in the struggle for civil rights. How does his leadership align with the values of Art of Living? Martin Luther King Jr. is a profound example of servant leadership rooted in nonviolence. I love his leadership was driven by the desire to uplift others and seek justice through peaceful means, much like Mahatma Gandhi. In the Art of Living, we emphasize the power of peace and nonviolence through Sudarshan Kriya, meditation, and mantra chanting. King's ability to lead with compassion and courage, even in the face of violence, is a powerful reminder of how inner strength cultivated through spiritual practices can lead to transformative change in society. Indeed, King's philosophy of ahimsa or nonviolence is deeply rooted in Vedic teachings. His leadership was about serving humanity, and his speeches often invoke spiritual themes including love, justice, and forgiveness. In Art of Living, we practice Agni Karyam and Sanyam Sadhana to purify the mind and cultivate the qualities of patience, forgiveness, and empathy, which are essential for leaders like King, who seek to serve others selflessly. His leadership was not about personal glory, but about uplifting the community, a core aspect of servant leadership. That's a very insightful example. Another person I would like to explore is Mahatma Gandhi, who, as you mentioned, deeply influenced King. How does Gandhiji's example connect with Art of Living's teachings on servant leadership? Mahatma Gandhi is perhaps one of the most iconic examples of servant leadership. His principle of ahimsa and his dedication to truth and nonviolence are at the core of his leadership. Gandhiji's approach to leading and leadership was entirely about serving others and promoting the welfare of all. In Art of Living, we cultivate similar qualities of nonviolence and truthfulness through practices like Shakti Kriya, Pranayama, and Trikal Sandhya. Gandhiji's emphasis on self purification and inner strength aligns with our philosophy that personal transformation leads to social transformation. Gandhiji's concept of Sarvodaya, the upliftment of all, is deeply connected to the Vedic teachings on Dharma and Karma Yoga. He believed that true leadership comes from serving the last person in society, which is very much in line with what we teach in the Art of Living. Programs such as Sadhana and Seva encourage individuals to develop self-discipline and humility, just as Gandhiji did. His life shows that true power comes from humility and service to others. Another figure that stands out is Aung San Suu Kyi, known for her peaceful struggle for democracy in Myanmar. How does her leadership reflect servant leadership? Aung San Suu Kyi exemplifies servant leadership through her long standing commitment to democracy and human rights despite years of house arrest. Her resilience and dedication to the well being of her people, even at great personal cost, reflects a spirit of Sanyam, self restraint, and seva that we teach in Art of Living. Jai Gurudev, today we are discussing a fundamental principle that underpins all endeavors at the Art of Living servant leadership, with the Art of Living being a global organization led by His Holiness Gurudev Shri Shiva Shankarji. We see that servant leadership is not only practiced but embedded into every aspect of work, whether it's teaching, community service, or business. How would you say servant leadership forms the core of Art of Living's philosophy?